Hello, welcome to Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota. I'm Katia. Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota is a nonprofit organization based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Every month, we host a human rights forum discussion about various topics chosen to expand our horizons and to educate us about important matters around the globe. The event is free and open to anyone. If you want to learn more about CGS Minnesota, please visit our website, www.globalsolutionsmn.org, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook pages. Facebook pages, Global Solutions MN, and Twitter is CGS_MN. Also, if you want to talk to us, you may send an email to cgsmn.contact@gmail.com. All this information will be posted in the chat so you can read. So today we are hosting the Human Rights Forum about Yemen. According to UNICEF, Yemen is the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, which was exacerbated by more than 6 years of war and COVID-19 pandemic. Our guest speaker is Fadia Thabet, an International Women Courage awarded in 2017. She worked for several years as a child protection officer in Yemen. She prevented children from being recruited and joining terrorist groups like the Houthis and Al-Qaeda and its local branch, Ansar al-Sharia, and prevented them, the kids, from becoming child soldiers in the Yemeni civil war. Fadia provided evidence to the United Nations of cases of human rights violations committed by various crimes. Fadia was a Fulbright scholar in 2015-2016 to the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, with you, the one and only Fadia Thabet.
Thank you, Katia. Thank you so much for this introduction. It's good to be here, see familiar faces and old friends as well. Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to shed a light on a forgotten war in the country. I will be discussing the impact of COVID-19, humanitarian crisis, and human rights violations. This is an event not only for raising awareness or funds or relief for Yemen. It's an urgent call for taking action to end the war that has been forgotten by everybody. It's a plea for immediate action in bringing back Yemen that has been hijacked by the Houthi militia, Saudi coalition, and their allies in the US, UAE, UK, and France. A multinational-led coalition started a military campaign against the Houthi militia with the goal of restoring Hadi's government. The coalition was led by Saudi Arabia and backed by the US, UK, France, and the UAE. Iran has its shares in this conflict as well. They supported the Houthi militia by sending advanced weapons and military advisors, a step to support Shia allies in a civil war to sway their positions and power in the Middle East. The situation in my country is catastrophic. It should be a matter of shame for international community and the West on giving up on what's happening in Yemen. Yemen has been declared to be the worst humanitarian crisis in 2018. And right now we have Afghanistan, as you all know. Since then, the situation has gotten worse. 2/3 of all Yemenis are hungry and nearly half do not know when they will eat next. Over 2.5 million cases of cholera. Only 50% of health facilities are fully functioning. Millions are affected by the falling economy and the currency inflation. Houthis militia takes up 1/3 to half of the employee salaries and third of any transaction you make from outside of Yemen to support your beloved ones. Food prices are 10 times higher, and the Yemeni currency has no value anymore. Black markets are thriving in Sana'a and Aden, and oil shortage is most of my countries beyond imagination. Before the war, Yemen relied on its own oil production, but everything stopped when the conflict began. On April 10, 2020, the first COVID-19 was announced, and the number of cases has increased within a few months in some areas of Yemen. Aden in South Yemen has the largest share. On September the 1st, according to Doctors Without Borders and the UN agencies, there have been more than 2,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, resulting in 567 deaths. Doctors and nurses have no personal protective equipment to deal with the patients. In Sana'a, North Yemen, the Houthi militia group's military of health held a press conference announcing only 4 cases were identified. It's obvious that actual number of cases in North Yemen has been suppressed by the militia. Houthi militia groups visited people who lost their beloved ones due to COVID-19 and made sure those people impacted knew to keep their silence in order to prevent panic and chaos so that the Houthi could maintain power and control. And this is actually happened to one of my mom's relatives or cousins. Crimes and atrocities, retaliations and prosecutions have been committed by every actor in the war. Saudi-led coalition has launched 17,243 airstrikes, killing over 20,000 people and more. The Houthi militia did not hesitate to kill and destroy anyone who stood or fought against them. Those that stood against them were tortured and disappeared immediately. The militia siege cities like Aden and Taiz for years surrounded Aden with over 5,000 landmines, and this is my hometown. Closed hospitals and literally blow up houses for those who represented the legitimate government, who is in exile in Saudi Arabia since the war began. Since January 2020, Houthi have increased their military efforts to capture Ma'rib and Al-Jawf in North Yemen. Since then, hundreds of fighters have been killed in an attempt to control Ma'rib from the government-backed tribal forces. The militia right now is the law and order in my country. They have formed a government with health, education, planning, and finance ministries. They also run specialized criminal courts, and they have complete control of Sana'a airport. They hold the power in my country, and anyone who does not fall in the line is quickly dealt with. Their criminal court has been used as a tool of intimidation. Female aid workers and human rights activists like Asma al-Qasimi were detained, beaten, tortured, and forced to watch other detainees hang from the ceiling as they kicked and punched them. She was sentenced 15 years in prison. In December 2019, the Houthi court issued a death sentence against President Hadi, who is currently in Saudi Arabia, and many others in the government. The Houthi court sentenced 35 Yemeni lawmakers to death. On April 2020, they ordered an execution for 10 journalists. In September 2021, Houthi militias executed publicly 9 men for political affiliations, and that was something that we have never seen in history. And sent to trial 62 women like Balqis al-Haddad and her 2 sisters, Amani and Iman, and 22 female representatives are still in prison in undisclosed locations. This was condemned by the American Center for Justice, and you can look it up. Since 2019, the Saudi-led coalition has blocked all sea, land, and air borders of Yemen and has not allowed international aid to be delivered to Yemeni people. On the other hand, Houthi militia blocked and confiscated food, medical supplies, and denied access to populations in need. They have imposed restrictions on aid workers and interfered with an aid delivery. This is a violation for United Nations Council Security Resolution 1612 that I worked with intensively for 6 years to protect children in armed conflict. According to UNICEF, children are used by groups. UNICEF is an organization that I worked with as well. Children are used by groups in conflict to fight, being a kind of like guard in checkpoints, and to provide logistic support to the military. The Houthi militia is responsible for 72% of child soldiers and use only 11 child soldiers used by Saudi Arabia. In South Yemen, a different story. There is a civil war within a civil war. The Southern Transitional Council, who fought side by side by the legitimate government against the Houthi militia, has broken their peace deal and denied solo control and claimed solo control of the regional capital of Aden. This is not new for Southern Yemen. People have protesting peacefully for decades, demanding a separation from the north and full autonomy of the south from the north. When the south and the north signed a unity agreement in May 1990 and formed what is known as Yemen. This part of Yemen conflict has been ignored and not recognized by the international community. Yemenis have been denied agencies to decide what's best for them. And this is a huge issue that needs to be addressed if peace can ever be achieved. Peace agreements in Geneva, Sweden, Oman have fallen apart, and each party has broken their ceasefire. There is a lack of peace inclusivity from the international community and UN. The UN peace process is focusing on ending the war by talking to the Yemeni legitimate government in Saudi Arabia and the Houthis militia, and ignoring other actors who are actively contributing to this war in Yemen. In the past few years, the UN successfully had put pressures on the Yemeni government and Saudi-led coalition. However, it failed to do so on the Houthi militia, which resulted in more control and gain and power for the Houthis. The international community decided to abandon Yemen with no accountability. Yemenis have been left alone to face their unknown future, if there is any at all. War crimes have been committed. Thousands of children have been recruited in front of my eyes. The country economy has collapsed. Activists have been executed. Houses and schools have been demolished, and country heritage sites have been shattered to a million pieces. With the global pandemic and vaccine inequality, Yemen has been forgotten as a country in a war. Yemen needs a roadmap and a commitment from every internal actors in a conflict, as well as more support from external players. Thank you. I understand it's kind of like really hard to summarize 6 or 7 years of war in an hour. So I try to capture as much as I can in those 4 pages.
Thank you so very much. It's cruel, it's brutal, everything that you're saying, and I understand it's just a highlight of 6 years. It's a great job highlighting. So I wanted to start and asking the first question. So Fadia, I understand everything that you have done because we talked before. And so you prevented children from being recruited by these terrorist gangs, and I understand groups, and I know that it's not only one time. You kept doing this, so you are a person who are in the middle of these terrorists, businesses, and so you prevent them from complete their business, and you report them to the UN. And basically you did everything to prevent them from concluding their criminal businesses. So I wanted to ask you, so is it safe for you to come back there?
Good question. No, it's not. My work started in 2012. And when my work started, it wasn't a prevention. It was getting children who've been recruited by the time when we were going through the Arab Spring in the MENA region in general. By the time we were focusing on Ansar al-Sharia, a group that is really active, a part of al-Qaeda in the Middle East. That time we were the only project started working in preventing, or not preventing, but getting children out of those kind of like groups. It wasn't a prevention, it was already kind of like a project that we kind of like designed after the fact, actually children being recruited. It was the first and the only project that was happening in Yemen for the first time. Children affected by armed conflict. That's the name of the United Nations resolution that we focused on. We had 6 graves violations that focus on children. Child recruitment is a huge part of it. Those kids that I worked with, the younger that you can tell is 9 years old, and the oldest that you can tell is 17. All of them join different groups for different reasons. Some of them being pushed by their families to secure income and secure food in the table. Some of them being fascinated by the guns and the weapons and the tanks and kind of like on the streets. And some of them being brainwashed by the idea of glory, by the idea of kind of like, or the wrong narrative that it's been spreaded about God and heaven. And that's one of the things that was struggling with. How can we combat that narrative? When we started this work, it wasn't that easy to get people on our side. For the first time, we were the only one doing it. And people were kind of like, but this is what our leaders or our kind of like locals are empowering us to do. We have to defend the land. This is what it's kind of like God wants us to do. And with the same reasons, we used religion and we talked to imams, school leaders, community leaders to combat that narrative. When we began, I negotiated a lot of these kids to get out of these groups, especially with Ansar al-Sharia. It was horrifying to see kids, one of them, 7 years old, that he would tell you his story, how he was fascinated by kind of like getting inside a tank to see what's inside. He was going in and out, visiting the neighborhood that was controlled by Ansar al-Sharia. One of the things he said that one of them approached him and he was just like, I have been seeing you coming here over and over and over. Would you like to get inside the tank? And he was just like, yes, I would love. 7 years old to 9 years old. And he would said, yes, I would love that. And then they approached him and said, how about you do more? How about if you can hold a gun? And this is how brainwashed those kids are. Some of them, I'm not gonna lie, some of them lost their legs, lost their eyes, some of them being kind of like in the front lines. And we had to deal with the ramification where we supported those kids and their families to come back to the communities, have a dialogue. Because as young as those kids are, some of them committed war crimes in their communities. So we brought them back and we hosted a huge dialogue, not just only one, not overnight, over and over and over. We established programs to reintegrate those kids back to the communities. We succeed to some extent. However, we failed on the other hand. Some of those kids still kind of like were traumatized, terrorized by the idea, and fascinated also by the idea. We lost 30 kids who joined ISIS in Syria from the program that we established. But that's the beginning of the program. And then within years, we kind of like encountered that. Calling children or recruiting children, it wasn't just only from one group or Ansar al-Sharia. I worked against the government, I worked against the military. We had a huge database that documented the human rights violations for every single kid that I worked with. When I say documenting, imagine that you are a lawyer, you build a case. So you have all of these evidence, you work with it for years, because when you submit a report like that to the UN, what you have to do is they're gonna send an investigator to the country to make sure that what you are claiming is right. So you have to build a case. So each case that we had to interview witnesses, the victims, the parents, the community members, sadly, collecting pictures, even if they died, collecting pictures, collecting testimonies, anything that you can imagine to build a case for just only one single child. In 2014, in September 2014, when the war started in North Yemen, we knew that this is something that the Houthis will target a lot of kids to be recruited. And if you Google it, just go to YouTube, Google it. You will find kids that is 8, 6 years old. They are holding guns with the militia. Unfortunately, by the time when the war started, my organization closed their office. I was the only one, and of course, evacuated the international staff. A lot of my colleagues decided to leave the cities and go to remote villages to protect themselves and beloved ones. I didn't have that luxury, so I stayed in the city and I continued my work, even though it was in kind of like high risk situation. I went to the hospitals, I went to the front lines. One time I was walking, I got a call from the Doctor Without Borders telling me there was a huge explosion that happened and kids were involved. Walking, kind of like getting a taxi and walking into there is a sniper, just you can see from the Houthi militia, just above the building. They're kind of like ready to take anyone or anything that is moving. Being in that situation, I had to hide my identity as a kind of like human rights activist. I had to hide my work card, my ID card. I had to wear the veil to protect myself, just to kind of like blend in to get those documents. All of these documentations being well done, I would say, and been submitted to the UN. However, no matter what I did, I would not be able to capture the trauma, the pain, the blood, and the tears of those kids in hospitals, in the front lines, and etc.
It's impressive. So we do have some questions here, and I'm gonna ask the first one for you. That comes from Dick Bernard. He said that he was looking up and found out Yemen is slightly smaller than Texas, but it seems more densely populated than Minnesota. He is asking if the comparison is relatively accurate. And also, he notes that Yemen, the nearest neighbor of Yemen other than Arabian Peninsula countries, is general area of Somalia. Do you have any observations about any of these data which might help us better understand your country?
I never been to Texas, so I don't know the statistics about that. However, I know the populations of Yemen right now. I think we are 26 million right now. When you think about Yemen, you think about the south, where you are kind of like really kind of like close to the oceans, and you think about the north, where it's kind of like a mountainy area. However, the point that you made, the closest country, because we are kind of like really close in the borders with Saudi Arabia to the north. That's one of the reasons Saudi-led coalition started this campaign. The Houthi came from the north, and they are a threat to Saudi Arabia to be in the border. And that's why they wanted to deal with the Houthis themselves, of course, with the approval from the government, from the Yemeni government. In terms of Somalia, which is kind of like interesting, right now we still have a lot of refugees and immigrants coming from Somalia. I just heard a report from IOM. For a lot of Ethiopians and Somalians, they use Yemen as a path to get to the Gulf countries, like Saudi Arabia, to kind of like maintain income and kind of like getting jobs. So I wouldn't say it's the last destination. It was before the war, and it was before the Arab Spring, 2011, 2012. However, right now it is a transit to get to Saudi Arabia to get a better life and better income. And I think 8 months ago, we had a report from, not I'm not sure about the timeline, from IOM, immigrations organizations or migrations or organizations. There was actually an incident happened in the Indian Ocean where a lot of these Somalians tried to flee to Yemen to get to Saudi Arabia. However, they drowned. So this is not new, that a lot of Somalians and Ethiopians, and sometimes even Sudanese, to be honest, because before I joined this work, I worked with the local NGOs where I worked with refugees from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Sudan. So my country is a hub for a lot of immigrants, African immigrants, just to come to the country, use it as a transit, and just kind of like go to another one. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay, next question comes from Jack Levi. Fadia, thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. First, what countries in the region are most likely to help improve Yemen's situation? And second, what countries anywhere in the world is most likely to make a difference to help Yemen?
Very good questions. I'm not sure how much are you aware how many people how many countries were and are still involved in the Yemeni war, not just only the Saudi-led coalitions. When we're talking about a coalition that involved in 2017, Morocco, Bahrain, Sudan, Ethiopia, you name it. It's a coalition. And you get a lot of logistic support from UK, France, despite the fact that US decided to withdraw from the war in Yemen. They are still providing intelligence to the Yemeni government in Saudi Arabia, and that's for sure. So who can help? Definitely whoever is kind of like funding the war, the weapons right now from the UK, UAE. UAE right now is taking control in South Yemen and kind of like as if that it's an Emirati territory, and that's been a problem. They put their foot in one of the most heritage islands, is named Socotra, to take over. So this is a fear for me and everyone in Yemen that the Yemeni identity is being kind of like taken away from us. So definitely all of that kind of like weapon and supports from UK, US, and France needs to stop. UK is fueling the coalitions until today, even though the US stopped. Who can help? You, I would say, individuals. My message to you and my hope is on the individuals rather than on the politicians or on the policies or countries. Because of the individuals, we can see an impact. The UN peace process is incomplete, to be honest. A lot of those actors who are actively involved in the conflict are not being called to be around the table. And this is a huge mistake. And this is not something that we want to see in the future. And any peace deal we're going to seal, it's going to be a fragile deal. In terms of supporting, I'm not sure. As a Yemeni, to be honest, I lost hope in a lot of countries that kind of like get involved with my country and got us to the point where we are right now. But there is power in the individuals to influence policies and politicians. And that's what I'm hoping for more than countries.
Next question comes from Jennifer Harrison. She asks, did Biden just sell any more weapons to Saudi Arabia? And second question, would Saudi Arabia have any weapons without those sold by the USA?
Well, the biggest supplies came from the US. Before they sold the deal, there was a huge billions and billions of weapon deal that was sold by the US to the Saudi coalition. So in terms of stopping that, even though the US stopped funding, there is an intelligence support still going on to the Yemeni government and Saudi coalition. So this is happening in Saudi Arabia territories. The US is not the only actor. If we want to really stop the fund, we need to tackle different governments. The UK is heavily involved, and it's been discussed with their politicians over and over and over. But something that I learned coming from a developing country or a third world country, war creates profits for those who are interested in an ongoing harm and pain. And that's what a lot of countries are doing.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
I just submitted something.
Okay, do you want to?
You want me to say? So Fadia, you just shared that individuals can make a difference more than countries or politicians. Can we make a difference by contacting our politicians, or are you implying something else? So that's my first question. The second one is much more personal, which is, what is it like for you to not be able to go back home? Personally, how does that feel? I've never experienced that, of course. So, and then, are your family members safe? Do you feel safe just because of them being there, and also because of their relationship to you and the work that you've done?
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for asking that question. Yes, when I said by the individuals, it's contacting our politicians. The US is playing a huge role in foreign policies with Canada, Australia, UK, and France. They are part of all of that. And they are in talk with the Saudi coalition. However, there is one thing that we need to understand. We have leverage on pressuring Saudi coalitions, but we do not have that same leverage to pressure Houthi militias. So we are trying to stop the war and trying to stop the airstrikes from Saudi Saudi coalition. What are we going to do with the Houthi militia? And that's the predicament that we are kind of like all are trying to face. They have been part of the peace talks to some extent. However, they have not shown any respect for any deal that's been made. They've been traveled to Oman, Stockholm, Stockholm, and met with UN officials in different countries. However, every time that we're trying to bring those axes together, one party will hold a deal together, and the other one, right the next morning, will destroy a whole village or a whole city, just kind of like bombing them and shelling them while they are living and sitting, while the UN is announcing it's a ceasefire for 7 days or a month. So that's kind of like one of my biggest concerns. And that's one of the things that I feel it is a delusion sometimes for the peace process, that they can put some pressures. They don't have the diplomacy and the pressures and the leverage to put it on the Houthis. That's to answer your first question. Your second question is very personal. Thank you for asking that. It's painful to not be able to go home. It's guilt that I'm here and I have all of these privilege. I have lights, I have roof on the top of my head. I'm thinking, well, I'm not thinking about any airstrikes that hitting my neighborhood. I'm not thinking about if I go outside of the house, it will be safe or not. It's painful. Every day for me, it's something that I wake up and internally I wish nothing happened. Nothing is happening back home. Every day for me, wake up in the morning looking at my phone. When I see a message from my mom, I hope it's not a bad news. My house got destroyed because of I received the International Women of Courage Award. That put a lot of public appearance on myself and my family. I had to change my last name, for example. I had to consult, and this is something that not a lot of people know about this. I had to consult with my family and friends if I should accept the award, because it was kind of like obviously that whatever low profiles work that I have done in the past will go in public. However, there is a moral obligation for me to those kids in my community to say what's happening, to say what happened, to say that people are dying and we don't see Yemen anymore in the news, and that's devastating for us. I miss my family. I haven't gone back home since I left. It took me a month to come to the US. It was a hard decision to make. Actually, someone recently asked me to write my story in one page. And all of these memories of leaving home came back. I support my family financially and mentally. I try to crack a joke with my mom whenever I can, or my siblings, to bring a little bit of joy here and there, but it's painful.
Thank you for sharing. Beautiful.
Thank you for your question. Next question comes from Regina Sneed. She
That's me.
asks,
Can I just say that?
yes, of course you can. Thank you.
Yeah. The Friends Committee on National Legislation has a number of advocacy teams spread out across the United States. Training for this began about 4 years ago. I've been a member of the Berkeley San Francisco team for 3 years. The last 3 years, our lobbying was against the AMUF to eliminate the 2002 and AMUF, which we're close to getting a vote on. In 2022, our goal will be to have a campaign to end US involvement by the Saudis in Yemen and the Yemen war. So we just spent some time lobbying on the arms deal, unsuccessfully, unfortunately, but we did get, 30 votes? 30 Democrats voted to stop that sale, which, gives us some hope. But just know that there will be a team. I think we have lobbying teams in 40 states covering a lot of congressional districts. I happen to live in Nancy Pelosi's district, which makes it a little hard to lobby. But the teams are very effective. We're having new teams all across the country every month. And so you can get more information on the FCNL website. And there are a lot of advocacy tools. There's a lobbying training coming up. They're almost monthly. So if you are so inclined, you can join an advocacy team and become part of a very well-organized and very effective effort. So I'm hoping our efforts over the next 2 to 3 years will have some results.
Thank you for your work. I really appreciate it. And yes, I would love to be part of this effort. One thing that I want to say, we are all kind of like trying to, especially here in the United States, what we are trying to do is we're trying to stop the US involvement in this war. However, from my advocacy point of view, I want to shift that effort to look into how the US can be involved in the peace process rather than fueling the war. How can we shift that military interventions and military and intelligence supports and logistics to be focusing more on the peace process? The US has a lot of leverages and power. Actually, the US and the UN put the Houthis militias in 2014 in the shame list, the UN shame list, as a terrorist group. And I added, or my group added Ansar al-Sharia in 2014. So we would need to shift that advocacy, not just only to stop funding, but also like in terms of how can we get involved in the peace process. I've been following closely the UN envoy representative to Yemen right now, and he's been doing a lot of efforts bringing those together. However, we need to understand that with a complicated history and actors that involved in Yemen, the US is just only one tiny part of it. We have the previous president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and his nephew. Right now, they are meeting in Russia, right now, Tariq Saleh. So we have the Iranian interventions and representations by the Houthis. In the future, what I'm afraid of, we will be another kind of like country that run by rebels and militias that will carry on. So far, what I'm asking is we need all the support that we can. We do not need any military interventions, but we need a peace process. That will include all actors And that would include the previous presidents, for example, like nephews, that he's right now just like meeting in Russia. And we have no idea why he's meeting in Russia.
Well, it's part of the proxy war, right?
Exactly,
Soviets,
exactly.
States, Saudis, you know, they're all proxy players.
And I have said that at the beginning of this war, and I put it clear that the Yemeni war is not a Yemeni war. It's a proxy war between Iran and Saudi Arabia in a Yemeni territory.
As have been several other wars in the Middle East.
Right.
Thank you, Regina.
How do
Regina,
I
I would love, yes, I would take
I'll
your
put my
email
email
and send
in
you.
the chat.
How about you message me privately? Thank you so much for your work.
Let me
I
put
look
my
forward
email
to
in the
talk to you.
chat and you can send me your email there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Bharat, please.
You are muted, Bharat. You always do that.
You are muted.
I think you're still muted.
Yes.
Hey, sorry, I said some really nice things to you, Fadia. You didn't hear them.
I would love to hear them again.
I thank you. It's very nice to be learning, although it's very sad. And what has affected me a lot are the pictures of the malnourished infants in Yemen. And since I'm involved so much in trying to end childhood malnutrition, and I know Doctors Without Borders also support other organizations who are trying to help, and then of course World Food Program and so on. The question I have is, how effective are they in light of all the turmoil and conflict and weapons and killings and so on that's going on? And the other thing is, you know, we have in Minnesota a very well established organization, you probably know them, Nonviolent Peace Force. They've been very good, like they were very good in the conflicts that was in Sri Lanka when it was at the peak of it. Have they been kind of in any way involved in trying to bring the warring groups to work as sort of peacemakers? Because they've been very effective wherever they have gone now. So anyway, those are the two questions I have.
Yeah, thank you, Bert, for your questions. To answer your second question, I'm not aware about that group. And if they are maybe kind of like involved, they will be maybe involved in certain groups that are trying to kind of like lobbying and work with small organizations. However, I have not heard the name of this organization.
If I may, Fadia, they actually send people, volunteers, go to the conflict areas. And they develop strategies to communicate and sort of try to sort of break the ice and very courageous people. I mean, so anyway.
Yeah, I would love to get in contact with them. I can.
You're not in the Twin Cities. You're not in the Twin Cities now, are you?
No.
See, because if you're here, I would kind of get them to meet you, you know.
We can still, the pandemic created a way for all of us to connect. So I think there is a way for sure to connect. Okay. You and I maybe can talk about this after the meeting for sure. To address your first question about malnutrition, a lot of you in this call worked with the UN agencies in the past, and you know how bureaucracy and hypocrisy works in those systems. There was a year and a half ago, there was a video that went viral on the internet that you see 5 to 7 kids with their parents sitting outside, having a fire, and on the fire there is a pot, and they are cooking tree leaves to feed themselves. This is how the situations in my home country got and how worse it is. Unfortunately, even though I worked with the UNICEF and I worked with the international NGOs, it does not get to the people.
Oh,
20%, all of these millions of dollars, I think the US donated over $19 million 2019, and I think there is $848 million was allocated for Yemen from all of the donors. However, to be honest, less than 5% are getting to the people. And that's one of the things that I've been advocating for. The UN systems probably is great to some extent, but also it's corrupt. And that's one of the things that we've been struggling with. Aid is not about empowering. Aid is about letting those people intervening and kind of like conducting an emergency interventions. However, in the past, a lot of us, not just only Yemen, a lot of countries relied on the aid. WFP, World Food Program, that was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, distributed expired food and medicines in my country. People have been kind of like advocating and putting that out in the internet. I myself got a lot of shipments from the UNICEF that was expired, oil, cooking oil that was expired, half of it water and half of it oil. Medicines from the, as I said, the WFP. We documented that as well as part of the human rights violations to get to those kids. So to be honest, Barat, I don't see the humanitarian interventions as a solution. In fact, I see it as contributing to the suffer. And when you look at the UN in general budget, it's huge, it's massive. But look at the international experts who are coming to our countries. How much their salaries, how much are going to the individuals, how much are going to people who are in need. And you can break it down. And I have budgets and I work with this system. I know this by fact. So going back to your questions, the UNICEF has been reporting about malnutrition for a while. And that video, you look it up, or I can send it to the group who are interested. But I have not seen anyone, or I have not seen an end for it. In addition to on the top of all of that, we have cholera, we have COVID, and we don't have vaccine. None of my people are vaccinated, and that's a sad truth. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Next question comes from Matthew Lafontaine. Matthew.
Hello. So shukran, alf shukr for your presentation and for your brave work, my friend. So I read an article in The Economist recently that said Saudi has withdrawn from Hodeidah, and I think that was part of a previous ceasefire as well, but they really painted it in a way that Saudi's looking for a way out. And I think saving face is part of the process. I think Mohammed bin Salman has a very fragile ego. That's my own opinion. But with them kind of looking for the door, do you see a way out of the conflict?
Thank you, Matthew, and it's good to see you again. To answer your question, yes and no at the same time. When you think about strategic location of Yemen, Yemen is literally in the border with Saudi Arabia. If they are withdrawing from this war, that means they are opening a door for them, that the Houthis will be kind of like have the opportunity to attack and gain power. Hodeidah, what you mentioned is, it's the second airport, or the first airport that we have, sorry, not airport, port that we have in Yemen that a lot of supplies comes through. Saudi-led coalitions, because of the pressures that a lot of international NGOs and international community put on Saudi Arabia, because they prevented a lot of aid from coming in, that by cutting supplies to go to the north, to the Houthis, and the Houthis were kind of like involved heavily in directing where those aids are going through, and just like selecting the individuals and communities that they are benefiting from. So definitely they want to save their face by withdrawing from that. However, right now, when you think about the legitimate Yemeni government, the president the vice president, and the whole parliament, they are functioning from Saudi Arabia. So who have that voice? Who have the power to say what can be done and what cannot? I think personally, I agree to some extent about what you said about Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman, when he started this war, everyone thought it's gonna be within 3 days. And it's been 6 years. And they did not want it to be dragged in a long conflict like that. However, strategically, they will continue to be involved because of the locations of the Houthis with the border in Saudi Arabia.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Next question, William Champ. Do you want to ask or do you want me to ask?
Oh, please proceed.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Is demilitarized zone such as exist between North and South Korea, existing controlled by the United Nations, a possible way to end the fighting?
Who asked that question again?
William.
William. Just trying to find the question here in the chat. William, is the question exists between North and South? William, would you like to elaborate more a little bit? I'm not getting your question. You can unmute yourself if you feel
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I was just wondering, some way that if the nations could get together and at least agree to stop the fighting for a while and put a demilitarized zone in between them. Is Yemen such divided such as the factions that are fighting are predominantly one in the north and one in the south, so that they could be separated by a demilitarized zone controlled by the United Nations?
This is a demand. It's been for decades for a lot of Southerns who are demanding peacefully to get a separations and break the unifying agreement that happened in 1990. However, being also like from the South, I would say that they do have that. This is a dream for a lot of Southerns. For my parents, this is a dream for a lot of people who are kind of like older than my age. However, right now, we need to reconcile with all of the parties that separating Yemen from South Yemen from North Yemen, it is something that needs to be in the agenda. However, it's not an immediate action. It needs to be considered, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be in a roadmap, whether that's after 5 years, after 6 years. Right now, there is a Southern Transition Council that announced themselves in the southern country that they are in power in South Yemen. However, they do not have any military support, and they are individuals functioning, some of them from UAE, Emirates, and some of them from Oman, and some of them from UK. So it's different actors, and we need to think about the timing when we need to do that. Maybe this is something I would love this to be considered, but right now we need to end the war. We do not need to end the war in South or North. We need to end the war in Yemen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, William. Next question comes from John Boyan. He asks how Iran fits in the puzzle.
Mariam, thank you so much for asking that question. Iran is heavily involved, indirectly, not directly. A lot of the six of the Houthis militias groups leaders have been in contact and been traveling in and out to Iran, getting a lot of before the war started. There was a huge report came out that 6 of their leaders been trained for several years in Iran to get that moment. Iran is supporting and funding. When you think about Houthi militias, we think about a small group, a rebel, a gang, have no funds, no money. They just took over the country. They relied on their allies and relationships with the previous president, Hadi, because he wanted to throw the Saudi-led coalitions and take over again. They didn't have any money. They didn't have any support. All of the drones attacks that the Houthi militia has been conducting on Saudi Arabia borders been actually launched and trained and targeted by the Iranian military support and intelligence. And at the beginning of the war, which is an interesting part, at the beginning of the war, a lot of the newspapers, when they were describing the war in Yemen, they call it Houthis militia. And many of us in the West, Yemen, many of us as myself, a lot of Yemenis, we try to put together in a perspective that this is the Houthi militia being backed by Iran. And since then, the phrase been used even in the New York Times, the Houthi militia is backed by Iran. Did that answer your question, Mariam? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to follow up. I think she is not here, probably.
All right, thank you. There is another question from Dick. He asks, is there an organization that's a reliable source of information about Yemen now and ongoing? I'm thinking of some website.
Yes, there are. There are 8 organizations that's been actually work and co-founders, a lot of Yemenis in New York and Washington, D.C. And I would definitely, it's called Yemen Aid. It's been led by one of my female Yemenis and fellows. There is the Sana'a Strategy Center. There is a lot of, this is a heavily researched policies reports coming out from a lot of Yemenis and scholars. I would definitely recommend that. There is Peace Track. It's an organization led by one of my closest friends, a female closest friend, who are trying to bring women to the table in the peace talk. It's one of the amazing organizations that I've been in contact with. I can send the list. There's a lot of podcasts. There are a lot of, and when I'm looking at those resources, I'm looking for voices from the global South. I'm not looking for westernized voices to analyze or expertise to analyze my home country. I'm looking for local resources and grassroots to analyze what's happening and having the opportunity to voice their concerns and voice what they fear. And I'm in contact with a lot of people on the ground as well.
I wanted to add to your list, democracynow.org. They have a YouTube channel, but they are on the website, democracynow.org, and they have daily information about Yemen, and they had one just this morning that I really recommend them, not only for Yemen, but other reliable information. And also,
to build on what you said, Katya, when I try to kind of like get informed about what's happening in a country besides mine, because I feel like I have a lot of resources, and my mom is telling me everything before the news, even though I feel that looking at resources outside of the U.S., The Guardian, The Washington Post, Democracy Now, some of them might kind of like not maybe align with certain political views or kind of like point of views that you carry, but it's a way that we get informed outside of the U.S. media.
Yeah, and as part of what we had started before, you and I can talk later and compile this list of resources, and we can add to our website. And you can go to our website in the tab Past Events, rewatch this video, and also browse around with these resources that Fadia is going to kindly share with us. Do we have any other questions? Fadia, what do you think, if you can even pick one, what do you think during your time working with that organization and saving children every day and fighting terrorists, what was the worst day of your life, or if you could pick the worst thing that you can remember that shocked your soul?
Yeah, wow, I wasn't expecting that question.
Yeah, we didn't agree before.
A moment definitely was when I received a phone call from a mother through the campaign that we did called A Pen Not a Gun, to prevent children from joining certain groups, whether that is al-Sharia or the Houthis or the government. We did that campaign and we reached a lot of kids in schools and communities. We put a phone number. It's kind of like what we call it, the hotline. And she called me and she said, "Can you meet me at the hospital? My son left the house in the middle of the night, and right now they took him to one of Doctor Without Borders hospitals, who we worked with very closely." And I went there. It was I think it was 8:30 in the evening. I went there. She wasn't there, and they brought her son, and he was in pieces.
It's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Okay, so it's time. I would like, first of all, to say a big thank you to you, Fadia. I also would like to acknowledge the CGS Board of Directors. Many of them are here tonight. If any of you would like to contact us, please, you can just go to our website, or you can send an email to cgsmn.contact@gmail.com. On behalf of CGS Minnesota, I want to thank you all for attending this event. If you want to watch again, the recording can be found on our website and on our YouTube channel. CGS hosts events every month. Please visit our website and learn what the next events are. So we will have an event on December 16. It's going to be our movie discussion about human trafficking with a nonprofit organization called Operation Underground Railroad. And the documentary is Operation Tucson, which is available for free on Amazon and on the YouTube. Fadia, thank you so very much for being here today. Citizens for Global Solutions Minnesota join other international organizations, governments, and the United Nations to condemn the unacceptable human rights violations in Yemen. And we hope that peace returns to that beautiful country. And with that, I leave you with your final remarks.
Thank you so much for the invitation to talk about my home country. It's an opportunity for a lot of Yemenis to talk about what's happening to them. As I said in my remarks, it's been forgotten, and I hope that no one will forget what's happening or what happened in Yemen. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this amazing event, and thank you so much for the attendees to be part of this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so very much. Thank you everybody for being here, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye-bye.